Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about the expertise on Huo. More specifically, we're going to be discussing the benefits that it brings along with the autumn wind effect and removing your rage bar. Some players have been asking me to go more in depth on Huo and give my 2 cents on whether or not you should actually come in here and use a skill reset to remove the expertise from Huo in order to gain a better advantage on the battlefield, which is a very nuanced and unique experience that is pretty much exclusive to Huo himself. Very few commanders have a better performance with their expertise turned off. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a partnered creator with Rise of Kingdoms, which means that they support a few videos on the channel every single month, just like this one. But the most important support comes from you guys dropping a thumbs up and subscribing down below, and comment if you want more guides like this one. If there's more specific things that you want to know about Rise of Kingdoms, drop them in the comment section below and I will try to tackle them as best as I can. Okay, so let's go over exactly what the expertise on Huo is doing. It is enhancing the 4th skill. Okay, normally the 4th skill is called Battlefield Appropriations. However, with the expertise, it changes the name to Conqueror of Khenti. Okay, the first bullet point says when you're attacking another troop on the map, so this does not work if you're hitting a garrison, swarming a flag, or anything like that. You have to be hitting another troop on the map. Okay, you'll gain 30% defense without the expertise, or 35% defense with the expertise. Looking at the second bullet point, it says without the expertise you will deal 20% more skill damage, and with the expertise you will deal 25% more skill damage. So far so good, right? So far it is clearly better to expertise Huo. Let's take a look, however, at the third bullet point. It says you will recover a portion of slightly wounded units with a healing factor of 1500 whenever you defeat an enemy troop with an 8-second cooldown, and it does not reset after exiting combat. Okay, the third bullet point on the expertise is a bit different. It says their troop triggers the autumn wind effect and recovers a portion of its slightly wounded units with a healing factor of 3000 whenever it defeats an enemy troop with a cooldown of 8 seconds. Again, does not reset after exiting combat. Okay, so what we can see here is that when you defeat an enemy troop without the expertise, it's a 1500 healing factor. With the expertise, it's a 3000 healing factor, so it's doubled, but you also trigger the autumn wind effect. So what is the autumn wind effect? It says resets the rage of this commander's troop. That's not good. All temporary buffs, that's not good. And debuffs, that is good. And the amount of time it has been in combat, that is good. Why is that good? Well, that's good because if we take a look at the third skill, it says if this commander's troop has been on the map for more than 30 seconds, has fought in at least one battle already, or has previously triggered the autumn wind effect. Okay, so here we can see an additional effect that is triggered by triggering the autumn wind effect. I know, a little bit confusing, but it basically, by resetting the amount of time you're in battle, you regain this additional 30% skill damage and 150 rage cost reduction for the first 15 seconds. Okay, so one more time just to cover everything here. The expertise gives you 5% more defense, 5% more skill damage, and if you defeat an enemy troop, it gives you double the healing factor and 30% more skill damage, 150 less rage requirement, both for 15 seconds, and it removes all of your debuffs, and the cost for that is resetting your rage and removing your buffs. Okay, so the question is, are all of those benefits that you're getting going to outweigh the downside of resetting your rage? And the other question is, how often are you even going to trigger the autumn wind effect? So that got me to thinking, right? Let me draw this out really quick just so that way you guys understand. The first instance that would trigger the autumn wind effect, obviously, is if you are hitting an enemy. Let's say your ally is hitting them as well, you end up killing them and they're dead, and now you get the autumn wind effect. That's literally what it says. That is how it works. The other time that the autumn wind effect will trigger is if you start hitting this enemy and your ally starts hitting this enemy, and then your Huo walks away, and let's say they're hitting some other enemy over here, and this enemy is now targeting your Huo and is hitting you even though you're not hitting them back, and your ally ends up killing this enemy, you will then get the autumn wind effect. Even though you're hitting this guy over here, you weren't hitting them, but they were hitting you, and now they're dead because of your ally, you get the autumn wind effect. And we can illustrate this with a barbarian really easily. We can have our Huo start attacking the barbarian, then we have our Minamoto with Cao Cao start attacking the same barbarian, and then once we see the enemy's health gets a little bit low, we can actually start to walk away with the Huo, and what we'll find is that even though we're walking away, the barbarian's still hitting us, and the enemy died, the barbarian died at the hands of the Minamoto. However, we see that we still get the healing factor here at the very end of the battle. You'll see right here, I know it's a little bit blurry, but it's 146,220 troops, and then we'll walk away and we get a healing factor of about 3,902. And then once we come in here to the battle report, you'll see that the troops remaining ended up being let's take a look here, it was 149,000, so it was about 3,000 higher than what we saw before. Even though I don't know why it doesn't show the actual healing here, they did do the healing. It must just have been after the battle was over because the enemy died. And if we take a look into the battle report, we'll see that it wasn't because Huo like hit them with a counterattack, for example. Let's take a look all the way at the end of the battle log here. On the final turn, you'll see that the enemy has 2,842 units and the Huo did a 0 damage basic attack and a counterattack also for 0 units. So then the question becomes, well, who killed the 2,842 units? And we can find that out by going into the Minamoto Cao Cao battle report. And again, we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see the exact same number, 2,842 units, and that was killed by Cao Cao's Dragon Rider, 2,842 units. So even though the enemy was still targeting our Huo as we were running away, the counterattack damage and basic attack from Huo did 0 damage, and the kill was dealt by the Minamoto Cao Cao. The instance where you will not get the autumn wind effect is if you are hitting this enemy, your ally starts hitting this enemy, now you go over here and you start attacking this enemy does not hit you back, they start hitting your ally, or they start retreating, or whatever the case might be, and your ally then gets the kill here. The question is, do you get the autumn wind effect because you were the starter of the battle or you were part of the battle? The answer is no, you do not get the autumn wind effect. You left the battle, you're hitting somebody else, you still have your rage bar, but they left the battle, they retreated, they're doing something else, they're hitting somebody else, your ally gets the kill, you do not get the autumn wind effect. Just like before, let me explain with a barbarian example. If you start an engagement and then you retreat while staying in combat or maintaining your rage bar, but one of your other armies or a nearby allied army or something like that ends up killing your target, this does not trigger the autumn wind effect. And as you can see here, we're about to see the barbarian die. I still have rage from the battle from this barbarian here, and you'll see that even after they're dead, even for a few moments, the enemy is defeated, I still have rage, a few seconds go by, the autumn wind effect disappears, I do not heal at all, and well, that's pretty much it. Now we can confirm that the Huo did not get the kill on this barbarian by taking a look at the corresponding battle report. So we can take a look here, the Huo, we scroll all the way down and you can see that we started to retreat around turn 10, nothing happened here. Here we have some like effects that are just on, I'm in KVK, so that's why they have a hunter's mark here. And then on turn 13 and on turn 14, actually, you'll see that the barbarian takes some additional damage from the nearby Minamoto, right? So if we take a look at the final turn for the Minamoto, we'll see that it's actually a skill shot from a Cao Cao. So it's the Dragon Rider effect, deals 27,000, but also there is a counter attack from Minamoto, which is 2,700. There's also a basic attack for 2,900. And you can see here, we can confirm that this is the triggering of the Kaio Hachiru, sorry if I mispronounced that, effect, which for some reason doesn't show up on this battle report. It shows up on the battle report of the Huo. Maybe it's because they started the battle. I have no idea why it would show up here, but regardless, we can confirm that all of the damage that killed this barbarian at the very end of the battle was done from the Minamoto's active skill, additional damage ticks, 2 of them over time, and also the basic attack, counter attack, and the Dragon Rider effect or active skill from Cao Cao. There was no like counter attack done from the Huo Saladin here. All the damage was dealt by the Minamoto Cao Cao, and that is why as you're running away with the Huo Saladin, even though you started the battle, you didn't finish the battle, and so therefore you do not get the healing factor, and therefore you do not also get the autumn wind effect. Okay, so now that I've shown you 2 examples, both of which were started by the Huo and were finished by the Minamoto Cao Cao, the only difference between the two being that in one example the Huo runs away and the barbarian then targets the Minamoto, and in the other example the Huo runs away and the barbarian continues targeting the Huo. In the example where the barbarian was targeting the Minamoto and the battle ends, Huo does not get the autumn wind effect, and in the battle where the barbarian was still targeting the Huo, even though they died to the Minamoto Cao Cao, the Huo does get the heal at the end of the battle, which implies they get the autumn wind effect as well. These things trigger simultaneously. Okay, so now that we understand when you would actually get get the autumn wind effect, the question is, do those things happen that often in real world fighting, and does it happen enough to offset the downside of the autumn wind effect? And also, why is this so bad, right? Why is resetting your rage so bad? Well, let's answer that question easily, and the answer is that if you reset your rage, well, now you have to wait a few more turns to cast your active skill, and your active skill is where a majority of your damage comes from these days, because active skills have a massive damage factor. Okay, so resetting your rage, especially if you have a secondary like Arthur who has a freaking 2800 3-target nuke, that's not something that you want to delay by a few turns, right? And triggering the autumn wind effect effectively delays the casting of your active skill, so that's not good, right? You never want to delay your active skill cast. You want to pop it as much as possible. Okay, so now that we know why triggering the autumn wind effect is bad, do you actually trigger the autumn wind effect often in battle? And the answer to that is going to be, it depends on your play style, and probably it will depend on the seat of kingdom that you're in. And I think this is where a lot of people get confused, and they've asked me these questions because they see Giga Chad mega wells in Imperium kingdoms with iconic tier 5 everything, talented everything, perfect armaments. They're like, yeah dude, you need to remove the expertise on Huo. It's like the experience of that type of player is so vastly different than the experience of 99% of players, free-to-play players, low spenders, whatever, that the benefit that they're getting from removing the expertise on Huo, or the at least the perceived benefit that they're getting from removing the expertise on Huo, is so absolutely minor that I honestly don't think any free-to-play players or low spenders should ever bother removing the expertise on Huo. And the reason for that is because most of the time when you're fighting in KVK, you're going in and out of combat, right? You're targeting the closest target, and when you start to see your screen flashing, you're being targeted, you retreat, right? That is basic how to field fight, right? That is field fighting 101 in Rise of Kingdoms, unless you are in a Giga Chad kingdom or a crazy KVK and you are maybe in Kingsland fighting to the death, and you often find yourself in scenarios where you are either going to sad face or you're going to sad face your enemy, right? If you are just going all in, you don't care about your trade, you just know that either you or the enemy will die, that's how the battle is going to end, then you're gonna trigger the autumn wind effect quite a lot, right? Because you are fighting tooth and nail, balls to the wall, and more than likely sometimes you're going to defeat the enemy and you're going to get the autumn wind effect. But if you're popping in and out of combat, what's the probability that you're going to be part of a battle that's responsible for killing an enemy? The odds are pretty low, right? Especially because most players retreat under 50%. Like most players, when they get to yellow or red, they're leaving the battle because they know that they don't want to take awful trades. Most of your terrible trades come from under that 50% threshold. I've talked about that in previous videos. Most players understand that by now. And not to mention, I kind of just glossed over this earlier, but it literally has an 8-second cooldown, which is a very long cooldown. So even in a scenario where you might trigger it a ton of times, you literally can't. The game functionally stops you from triggering the autumn wind effect very frequently. So in a world where you're not necessarily fighting until somebody sad faces, and in a world where most logical players are retreating under 50% or under 30%, right? In the most average and expected of outcomes, you're not going to be triggering the autumn wind effect all that much. And when you do, you will reset your rage, which sucks, and you will remove your buffs, which sucks, but you will remove your debuffs, and to compensate for the fact that you will now have a few more turns delay for your active skill, when you do cast your active skill, it's going to be a 30% bonus to skill damage for that active skill, right? So it's a little bit delayed, but it's actually a little bit stronger. So there's a trade-off, right? There's definitely a trade-off. And again, if you're fighting at the highest level possible in Rise of Kingdoms, there may be scenarios where you're triggering this often enough to justify removing the expertise from Huo. But I'm here to tell you that for most of you watching this video, 90+% of you watching, you're going to trigger the autumn wind effect very infrequently. And by leaving your Huo non-expertised, you're losing 5% defense and you're losing 5% skill damage, right? That's the equivalent of 2 city skins that you're losing in terms of stats, right? Think about that. Every single exchange that you're in, you will go into with 5% less defense and 5% less skill damage. That is inevitably going to make you trade less. It's impossible for it to not make you trade slightly worse. The only thing that would compensate for that worse trading is that you would trigger your active skill perhaps one more additional time in your open world exchanging, maybe 2 times if you're fighting in a crazy kvk Imperium kingdom, whatever, right? And so again, for those players, maybe you would consider removing the expertise from Huo for those open field fights. But for most players, it's way safer to rely on the guaranteed 5% defense, 5% skill damage, and the double healing factor, right? Think of it like this: if you have your Huo not expertised, you're losing 5% skill damage, which means every single skill shot that you cast with Huo and with his secondary, which is probably going to be King Arthur at this point, is going to lose 5% skill damage. So every single skill shot will be slightly weaker if it is not expertised, right? And you're doing that in the hopes that you would avoid triggering the autumn wind effect enough times to compensate for having literally weaker active skills across the board all the time, right? And I know it's only 5%, but like, so is your Twilight Falls, right? Like, that's what are we talking about, right? My point with this video is that you are presented with an option of taking a guaranteed stat boost, a guaranteed skill damage boost, a doubling of the healing factor, and in the worst case scenario, when the autumn wind effect does trigger, you're going to get a 30% skill damage bonus and 150 less rage to compensate for that, right? So for some players, it might be worth removing the expertise, but for 90+% of you guys watching, if you have him expertise, just leave him like that. This is like the most micro of micro optimizations, and truthfully, to even like tell if there is a significant difference, you would have to do like 1,000 battles without the expertise and 1,000 battles with the expertise up against basically the same players. But it can't be a 1v1 because that's not going to be how this works, because it's going to, you really need to test real world fighting. There's so many variables in here that it's like almost impossible to genuinely test this properly. So really it's going to come down to the individual and the kingdom that you find yourself in. Are you sad facing players a ton or not? If yes, maybe remove the expertise, but most of you are going to come to the conclusion that that's not you, that most players are not sad facing people all over the place. And as I described earlier, even in a scenario where you're hitting somebody who does eventually get sad faced, if you go on to hit somebody else and they're not hitting you back, that sad face does not count towards the autumn wind effect. So hopefully this clears up the confusion with the expertise on Huo, especially for free-to-play players and low spenders. Your skill resets are extremely valuable. I would not waste it on removing the expertise from Huo. That is like such a micro optimization that you're not even going to notice. Save that for another commander that maybe one day, if they ever release another commander that's really good at 5515 or something like that, you're going to be thankful that you have those skill resets instead of wasting it on something like this. And I know the comments are going to be flooded with people who have anecdotal experience saying, oh, I removed my Huo and then like he did so much better. And it's like, it's, look, if it worked for you, great, right? But I want to reiterate that I'm trying to address like the vast majority of the players here, not those of you in the top 30 kingdoms or even in the top 50 kingdoms or whatever. Like, it is frequently my opinion that you should take the guaranteed stats over the chance of something else, right? That's the same reason why we always say to increase the iconic level of a piece of gear before you try to refine it. It's because you want to get the guaranteed upgrade before you get the chance at an upgrade, right? The same concept here. The expertise has guaranteed stats, guaranteed skill damage. The non-expertise has a chance at giving you a benefit on your raid cycle, but it's not going to happen as often as you think. And not to mention, if you're a free-to-play player, right, or a low spender, and you find yourself chaining barbarians, you're going to want the 3000 healing factor. It's going to be really nice for the PvE content. It's also going to be really nice for Sunset Canyon and Lost Canyon and Golden Kingdom, right? Like, there's so many instances where even though it might not necessarily be PvP, there's still plenty of other like instances where you would want to have a really nice healing factor here, right? So those game modes, even though that would be a slight benefit to you, the value that he brings to those game modes is increased with the expertise as well. So always remember that it's not just the one instance of PvP, it's the entirety of the game if you zoom out. Okay, so now let me play a little bit of devil's advocate, right? Because I know a lot of really high-end players swear by the removal of the expertise on Huo. So in this part of the video we're going to do a little bit of devil's advocate, and we're going to try to figure out if you as an individual player would benefit from removing the expertise on Huo. Okay, let's assume that the main thing that you're missing out on from not expertising him is the 5% skill damage, right? You are missing out on some defense, but like, let's assume that that's such a small amount, it's a rounding error, it'll affect your battle reports, but it's so slight, right? It's so minor. Let's say the 5% skill damage is what you care the most about, right? Well, how do we value 5% skill damage? Well, let's just do a little bit of napkin math here. Okay, if we take a look at Huo's active skill, it's 2700, and a 5% increase to that is 135, right? That's really small. That's a really small bonus to skill damage on every single skill shot. In fact, you would have to get this bonus, this 5% skill damage bonus, 20 times, right? If we multiply this by 20 in order to get the equivalent value of an additional skill shot from Huo, right? And so you could make the argument that in any given war or battle, in the scenario where you do not have the expertise, if it causes you to cast your active skill one additional time, then that is equivalent to 20 casts with the 5% skill damage bonus from the expertise, right? Okay, so now we kind of have a value on this 5% skill damage from the expertise. Again, we're ignoring all the other benefits that are here. Then we have to figure out, how often do you cast 20 active skills in Rise of Kingdoms? Well, there's a 1000 rage requirement. You do have a reduction in the rage requirement here on Huo, but let's be super generous. Okay, let's be super generous and say that it takes 10 turns for every cast of your active skill. That's not the case, especially if you're using something like Feral Nature, and you have, of course, Rejuvenate, and there's the reduction in skill cost, right? But let's just keep it super simple for napkin math. Okay, let's assume every active skill is 10 turns. Okay, if you avoid the autumn wind effect by not having him expertise at least one in every 19 skill casts, well, then you would theoretically be net positive, right? Because you're getting potentially at least one additional active skill cast, in theory, in 19 active skill casts, as opposed to the 20 that you need in order to make this 5% skill damage bonus worth it, right? So 20 is kind of the break even, but if you can cast one additional time every 19, well, then you're positive. Okay, so 19 active skills, and let's say again it takes 10 turns per active skill. Okay, that's 190 turns if we're being conservative here. Okay, so if we assume that there's 1 turn per second, right, then that is 3.16 repeating minutes per additional active skill that you would need. But let's just keep it very simple, right? Because we've done some rounding here, we've assumed the worst case scenario in terms of 10 turns per active skill. Let's just call it 3 minutes, right? So if you can avoid an autumn wind effect every 3 minutes, once every 3 minutes, then it might be worth it for you to remove the expertise from Huo, right? So essentially what I'm saying here is that if you are responsible for sad facing an enemy once every 3 minutes, then it might be worth it to remove the expertise here. And as I mentioned before, it's kind of, the enemy has to die with either you targeting them or them targeting you having already been in that engagement, right? That's as much as we've discovered so far. And so you have to ask yourself, are you sad facing an enemy every 3 minutes, right, with your Huo, right? And for some of you might be, right? You actually might be, because you're in these big crazy KVKs. But I'm gonna be honest, guys, I'm not chasing people down for the sad face, right? Like, I mean, if I can get it, that's great, but I'm not targeting low marches. I'm targeting whoever's closest to me, right? So I would have to have the closest march to me be a low march that I can sad face once every 3 minutes, right? And again, that's also ignoring the fact that you're getting a defense bonus here, and the autumn wind effect, when it does occur, does give you 30% more rage, right? So taking that napkin math into account, you can apply that to your own gameplay, right? And if you do think genuinely that you are sad facing people all over the place, right, definitely more than once every 3 minutes with your Huo, then maybe you might want to consider removing the expertise from Huo to avoid that autumn wind effect. But I'm gonna be honest, guys, I feel like that's a very high level play that is only something that I would rely on in the highest of kingdoms, at the highest level of Rise of Kingdoms. For most players, I feel like it's just a safer bet to go for the expertise. Just get the guaranteed skill damage, get the guaranteed defense, right? And this is another reason why, you know, the higher end players can kind of ignore the expertise defense, is that if you're a mega whale, you probably have 5% more defense than your average player anyway, at least, if not more than that, right? So you can give up that 5% defense and not notice any change at all, whereas a lower, you know, a free-to-play player, a low spender, whatever, they might have much worse armaments than you as a whale. And so that 5% defense will matter. It can bridge the gap for that player, for that army, right? Or I can at least help doing that, right? So that's kind of where I'm at here with the napkin math. You guys can make the determination for yourself if it will be worth it to remove the expertise on Huo. I personally am going to play it safe, and I'm going to leave the expertise on my Huo. I tend to play it a little bit safer, and you guys can determine for yourself if that's worth it or not. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video, drop a thumbs up on it. It really helps out the channel a ton. It helps get this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it. And while you're down there, comment down below your thoughts on Huo's expertise. Do you have him expertise or not? Did you opt out of his expertise? Let me know in the comment section below. And while you're down there, consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.